negro y todos me señalaron. Dijeron igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Siempre. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi misión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Hey, good morning, everyone. What's up? Peace, 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 peace.
Peace, everybody. Welcome back to the International Rise Up International Morning Show. How you doing, Natasha?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good today. How are you doing, Fernando?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yesterday was the 58th Black Panther, Black Panther Party since it was founded, and the Comrade Kalanji had on, the elders, Jalil Muntaqim and Daruba bin Wahad. That was something special. I encourage everybody that hasn't seen it to go back and check it out.
I didn't get a chance to watch it yet, but I definitely I'm going to go back and watch it later on today. I definitely want to see that show. I'm, sad I couldn't be there. But
same. I'm heated.
But hopefully next time, because actually I was just thinking about the Comrade Jalil, and thinking about having the amount of time that he spent in prison, and having him come home, and just also the depth and breadth of knowledge that he has too. I think is amazing. Like all of them, like Daruba. Like Sekou Odinga, like Veronda Bowers, who just
and it's crazy to see how sharp they still are. They're real sharp still. With the analysis, with everything. Like, definitely salute to them, and to all the ones that aren't with us in the physical as well. Rising power.
Absolutely, big up to our freedom fighters.
Always.
Who, look up to the Black Panther Party, and whose, example and teachings that we still are learning from.
Yeah, and we thank them for the inspiration as well, for I know personally, the Black Panther Party was, one of my biggest inspirations as far as, anything from revolution to, the movement, being a part of an organization, all of that, understanding, who we are. As African people and what the struggle is about, the Black Panther Party was definitely a huge part of my learnings, and understandings. So
same here. I remember when I found out about when I first learned about the Black Panther Party, and all of the things that they did, I was just like amazed at all of the things that they did and what they were able to accomplish, but also how young they were.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was really, amazed at how young they were. It makes me think about, one of the things that I think about a lot all the time is how in this day and age, in this society, under, settler colonial rule, we are made to be so immature, right? They're told that like your 20s and your late teens are supposed to be, a time of you just doing nonsense.
That's true.
As opposed to like really using that time that you have, the time, the energy, that comes with youth, and to really do something with it, and to be able to harness that energy in ways that really can be transformative for your community. And instead of us doing those things, we're told that we need to go out here and do a bunch of nonsense.
Do nothing. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. That's a good point, and that's by design. But yeah, definitely. I mean, right on that point. Like, I know when I was that young, I know my, political education wasn't on point like theirs. So that's part of, because of what you were saying. Like, that's kind of what was start. I didn't grow up in a revolutionary family per se. And so I got my political education a little later on, but
yeah, sometimes you look back and you think, man, if I would have known this when I was 20, if I would have known this when I was, luckily for me, definitely when I was in my 20s, I started to become very much more politically aware. Like, I started to deepen my political analysis. But if I had known, if I had the type of depth that I had like in my mid-20s in terms of knowing things and organizing as I did, if I had that kind of knowledge in my early 20s, if I had it in my late teens, like that,
I feel same. Like in my 20s, I was already, understanding certain things. Like I had already read Malcolm and all of that, but I mean, like my analysis wasn't like, on point like them, like the way
exactly.
like the way Fred Hampton was at that age, like the way, but that's how it is.
And so I think I think it's those, that's especially because I work with youth, I think, and within like the education field, I think so much about that and the importance, and how do we and I also think about COINTELPRO when we think about COINTELPRO, and the way that J. Edgar Hoover's one of his main things was to disrupt and to discredit and to eliminate and to stop the I'm phrasing it loosely here, but to like stop a youth, or to prevent a youth-led movement in a sense, right? And so that, how we see that today, how we're stuck, like you were saying, is by design. We're stuck in this pattern of doing other things that are not productive for ourselves and our community in our youth, as opposed to what we know the Panthers were doing and other organizations, even before them too.
Yeah, Jaleel Moonson King spoke about that yesterday. Actually, he spoke about how COINTELPRO made sure that a revolutionary will be a dead revolutionary. How they spoke about that, and so how we lost a couple of generations, due to that, and then the infiltration of drugs in our neighborhoods, etc. All of that, killed us and made it, made it difficult for a couple of generations, made it real hard, and so. He spoke about that yesterday. It was definitely a dope show, So
definitely everybody check that out. And actually, speaking of Jaleel Moonson King, he's one of the organizers who put together the People's Senate, and they're actually having and I'll share with us all real quick. They're having the People's Concert on October 20th. And so it's a benefit for political prisoners. The People's Senate brings together multiple organizations and people from across the country to work toward, like a kind of like what Daruba talks about. And they probably talked about it in the show yesterday. Maybe, I don't know if they talked about it yesterday, Fernando, where they're bringing people together from all these different organizations and across the country to do work around political prisons, but also to do work in terms of bringing our talents and our resources and our ideas together to really help each other in this way. That's kind of what Yoruba calls for a united front, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, united front against fascism.
Yep. So check that out. If you're in New York, even if you're not in New York, you know, and you come into New York, check it out. It's going to be on October 20th from 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. And it's going to be at 2271 Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard between 133rd Street and 134th Street. So definitely check that out. So sure. I think that's definitely a dope event to look at and check out.
Yes, no doubt.
So should we go to a Black Power break? Because we're supposed to have.
I think. Yeah, we're gonna have a special guest. We got a real special guest coming up, but I think we could go to a Black Power break.
So y'all watching Rise Up Media, Rise Up Morning Show.
Rise Up.
We're going to take a quick Black Power break and we'll be right back.
About this whole question of violence that's been bandied around, very clear. Should be made very clear that in the Black Panther Party and among all black people, it's not a question of violence, aggressive violence. This is what people mostly think of. It's a question of defending ourselves and our people against the violence that's being waged upon us and has been waged upon us for the past 400 years. A war of aggression is going on against black people, not only on the level of guns, but on the level of housing, on the level of education, on the level of food, on every level of the society. There's aggression, there's hostility, suppression, and violence directed against black people. The program of the Black Panther Party, originally started as the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, is to move to defend and protect black people against this violence so that we can move to organize black people into a sufficient power to obtain our needs.
That way. What I would think it would be wise for minority leadership to do would be to seek out and to interpret and to press those points in which there is a common self-interest. Economics, political, housing, things of this sort. Now, I'd like to have her react to that.
All right. First of all, this was the policy of Dr. Martin Luther King. He asked these people to move in their own self-interest. They refused. And secondly, what you're asking is something that's human. And I don't think it's possible for this establishment to react to a human problem in a human way. It's impossible. In terms of self-interest.
You think it's that inhuman?
It is. It's obviously that inhuman to me if you look at its history and what it's doing now. If that is human, then we're something else. So I have to assume that they're non-human. In terms of self-interest, it's a question of whose self-interest. There are masses and masses and masses of white people who would agree with you on that point. But these white people do not have any power, they do not have any say, they do not have any control. And the self-interests of the people who are in charge are not those of human beings. They're mainly based on money and power. You see, if these people would move in their self-interest, they wouldn't beat their own children in Chicago and crack their heads. If they moved in their self-interest, they wouldn't send their armed police onto their own college campuses where their own children are studying. They wouldn't do that. So in terms of their own people, they don't move in their own self-interest. So we can be assured that in terms of black people, they will not move in their self-interest. What is important is for black people to move in black people's self-interest and let them do whatever they want to do.
In the most vicious system of racism.
But then the funds were taken away.
But they got them back.
Right, but they weren't in control, not really.
No, they're in control now, and they're in control in Alabama. I'm saying there's never going to be a time when you're totally in control.
Why not?
Life is a constant struggle.
I don't see why black people can't be totally in control of their destiny.
Oh, only if you struggle and fight for it.
Well, that's what it's all about.
But you got to fight with your head as well as with your fist or with your gun.
Well, maybe,
I think that all wars involve fighting on every level.
That's
you see,
right.
Politics is warfare without bloodshed, and warfare is politics with bloodshed.
Yeah.
Including white people.
I'm quoting Huey Newton and Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh.
Well, let's put it this way. If that's the case, then if we're
in
looking...
the English language.
If we're looking at...
We are back.
Yes, welcome back. So that was Kathleen Cleaver, member of the Black Panther Party, as we were talking about them before. But we can talk a little bit about more about it later, because, you know, our very special guest has entered the building. And we're very, very excited and happy to have him here. And so before he gets on, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, just let you know who he is. We have Omowale Clay, the chairperson of the December 12th movement, coming on. And the December 12th movement is a human rights organization that's based in New York, that organizes political actions leading toward the national mass mobilization on racism and self-determination as well. They are also the International Secretariat, a non-governmental organization with consultative status in the United Nations Economic and Social Council. And they participated in the Commission on Human Rights since 1989, representing 40 million Africans in the United States. And we'll let Omowale Clay talk a little bit more about the December 12th movement, as well as the New York 8 and the work that the December 12th movement does overall. So welcome.
Welcome,
Omowale.
Peace, how y'all doing?
Peace. Good, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay given the circumstances of the things going on, you know. But happy to be on. My first time to be on, so very happy to be on.
Yes, we're happy to have you. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
I have somewhat of a short time limit that I gotta get out by 10 to 2. Okay.
Absolutely, we'll get you right. We'll get you right on time. Done with the interview. But so, welcome to the Rise Up International Morning Show. As we said before, can you tell the people a little bit more about who you are and the December 12th movement?
Yes. I recently became chair of the December 12th movement. We lost our founding chairperson, Sister Viola Plummer, this year. We lost her. She passed on actually Martin Luther King's birthday, you know. But in February had a tremendous tribute to her at House of the Lord Church. You know, we're very proud of the fact that people at least recognizing some of her tremendous leadership, you know, in building the December 12th movement. And as I understand, we'll talk about a little bit the New York 8 case, because this Thursday at Brooklyn Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation, we're going to celebrate the 40th anniversary. It's 40 years. Boy, I'm young. Jesus. It's 40 years, October 17th, 1984. You know, 500 members of the FBI's Joint Terrorist Task Force swept across 4 boroughs, from the Bronx to Manhattan to Brooklyn and Queens, and arrested 8 of us and charged us with ultimately what came to be known as thought crimes. They charged us with 20 RICO counts, and each RICO count carries 20 years. And then there were various gun charges and things of that nature. But there are a number of things that were set in motion. So let me kind of approach the December 12th movement, actually from the New York 8. We have been doing work in our community in different aspects for years in terms of that. One of the main organizations we've been working with was the Mobilization Committee Against Police Brutality at that time. And some other international work we've begun to take up. But we also began to take up the national question, you know, at least politically, in terms of just talking about the nature of our movement, in terms of Black people's right to self-determination. And we think that was a very important issue, that Black people have to decide their relationship to the United States. The United States can't decide it. When we were freed as slaves, they put in those amendments to automatically give us citizenship in the United States, as if that's what we wanted in that regard. So that was something that was forced upon us. I certainly thought that was an issue. We also always adhere to the question of our right to self-defense, up to including armed self-defense if necessary. Those are some of the lessons that Malcolm taught us about our human rights. as opposed to just civil rights in that regard. But when we were rounded up, we really kind of looked at it as an effort to begin to attack the Black liberation movement in general, and us in particular, because of the growing contradictions in this country, its motion towards, even back then, fascism, that they targeted us. It targeted us because of our support for other Black political prisoners who had been in jail for decades already in that regard. And so they came with arresting us, and what did they call it? Ultimately, it was a conspiracy to commit conspiracies. Something reminiscent of some of the things happening now with the Uhuru 3 and Chairman Omowale Clay, what's going on there. And we're very supportive of what's happening. The New York 8 case was precedent setting in the sense that when we were arrested, we found ourselves facing a number of legal challenges. And we certainly think that's one of the arenas by the rise of fascism in this country. It will come to us legally, all wrapped in a package, and certified. The Constitution is always in motion in that regard. But there were a number of legal challenges. One was we were the first people held in the United States under the No Bail Reform Act. This was a new law that was passed 5 days before we were arrested. It was modeled on the preventive detention law that was being done in South Africa, that instead of presumption of innocence, once it was triggered that you would be held under the no bail law, that in fact, no longer were you assumed innocent. You had to prove that you deserve to have the right to bail. And that was a fundamental turnaround of the whole constitution of presumption of innocence. Once they instituted that, we found ourselves in what became the longest bail hearing in the history of the United States, finding ourselves now having the fight for the right to have bail, or as they say, to prove that we were not a danger to the community and that we were not a risk of flight. Now that's interesting because it's usually the prosecution has to prove why they should keep you in jail. We had to prove why we should not be in jail. And so that was something new. Of course, the preemptive strike was we were arrested by 500. In the history of the United States, in terms of for 8 people, we were arrested by 500 members of the Joint Terrorist Task Force at different places. And these were an armed military style operation. The NYP's SWAT teams were involved, but the Joint Terrorist Task Force was really a merger of the FBI with local police across the country to make them, take a police officer walking a beat and make him part of a national police force in that regard. So when we were held by that night, fortunately, none of us were shot at that time. Myself and Sister Latifah Carter, and let me just say who folks were in the New York area. It was Coltrane Chimaranga out of the Black Liberation Movement, Robert Taylor, myself, Omowale Clay, Roger Wareham, another comrade Jose Rios, Latifah Carter, Colette Peen, Viola Plummer, and Yvette Kelly. And that night, Latifah and I were arrested at Small's Paradise, by about 50, 60 agents. Arrested us at Small's Paradise. They filled the hallway, put guns to us. They had machine guns. They had all kind of stuff. Our families, Roger was arrested in Brooklyn in Flatbush Avenue in the middle of the street. He was surrounded by about 80 agents with shotguns and machine guns in the middle of the street. They raided our house, which is around the corner. They had a bazooka there. They lit the neighborhood up so much, neighbors thought it was daylight. It was so many lights and stuff. And they were told to stick their heads in and stuff. So it was a very terroristic approach to arrest, to make people then think, oh, something must really be happening because look at this arrest, And then on television, we were driven into FBI headquarters. Benjamin Ward at that time was there, whoever was the FBI. The nature of it was to create New York City that we just stopped something of tremendous terroristic potential from happening. So we were almost convicted before we even set foot in the court in that sense. So that was the whole preemptive strike. And you remember, that's a military operation, very much used by Israel in the Middle East, where I remember they blew up some of the Iraqi nuclear facilities a while ago because they were afraid of what they might do in the future. So the preemptive strike concept is strike now before something develops later on. So after the preemptive arrest, after the bail hearing, then we found ourselves in a unique position because, you know, there's a classical legal position that wives and spouses cannot testify against their husbands or wives. Well, they created a whole new legal maneuver called the Chinese Wall, where there were 8 of us. So like my wife could testify against the other 7, and that they set up 8 grand juries. So my wife could testify in all the other grand juries except the one for me. Now it's a conspiracy case, so how do you really do it? But they set that up because they know our position about not collaborating with these political grand juries. So we found that our friends and spouses in jail too. In fact, some of them served more time than we did, in fact, in jail. The case, so the New York 8 case was really a demonstration of how far they could go. They acknowledged that we had not done any of the things they said. The principal things was to break Sekou Odinga and Kwesi Balogun out of jail. One of the other ones was to rob armored cars. They had no concrete evidence that we had actually done anything like that. So it was really a conspiracy. And so that you know how RICO works, that's the racketeering influence law. RICO works, it was really targeted toward organized crime. And since organized crime represented an enterprise that was, you didn't see it was there. It carried out other things, but the enterprise itself was a criminal enterprise to carry it out. That's how they wrote it around coming at the mob center, the center of the mob. They said our political organization was a criminal enterprise. And so therefore, guns that they said, which would be a state case. They said, no, this is part of their enterprise. So they charged that. Anything that they could do as an act, they would say this was a predicate act for RICO. So there we were in bail. We had to fight our way for bail. Like I said, we had the longest bail hearing in the history of the United States. Coltrane Shimaranga, who they looked at as a centerpiece for the case. He was the longest one. He got out to we all ended up first defeating them, not getting killed, getting out of jail, overcoming the bail issue, and then the trial started. And you know, we're very fortunate because the people supported us. Gil Noble did a couple of shows on us. BAI. One of the things we did was we prosecuted our case against the government. Our position was that it's not the U.S. government against the New York 8, it's the New York 8 against the U.S. government. And so our position was to put them on trial and not put us on trial. And in that regard, we continued to organize even when we were in court. We continued to organize. And we had conferences, we had rallies, we did that, outreach we did, we spoke at different events and stuff, and the courtroom was always filled. And so, Thursday, we're having a program at Restoration where we want to go over some of the issues that were happening at that time that manifest themselves even right now. And so we look forward, and just in terms of your audience, people would like to come out and get further information about that. We're going to show the film. The program's at 6:30. We're going to show the film that was done about our case. It's called Straight Ahead. We're going to show that first, and then we'll get into the program. We're also going to probably have Brother Omowale will come on and give us an update on the Uhuru case and the status of what's going on in that case right now. You know, there's a letter writing campaign that was going on. Today is the last day to get the letters in. But if you go to Uhuru 3 website, they have a whole layout of how you can just quickly run off a letter and send it to the judge. And that would help. They were looking for 500 letters. I think they're over 400 now. But if people can do that are listening, just go to Huru through the website, and they'll show you, walk you right through how everything's set up. Very cool to write a short letter or something. If you don't know any of them, there's a way you could talk about their politics or what you unite about. If you do know one of them, then you could talk as a character letter in terms of that. So that's what's happening this Thursday. And, you know, like I said, our victory in the New York 8 case, we were acquitted of all the major charges. The only one who actually served time was actually Colette, because Colette's case was severed from ours because we found out her lawyer was not admitted to the bar. And so we found that out in the middle of the case. This guy named Silver. And what gets me is he's one of the best lawyers there. And he had an ongoing relationship with the prosecutor in the Eastern District. And they all knew him. He practiced there. And the only way they found out he didn't have hadn't passed
license to practice,
was that it turned out that a case had gotten overturned and that he was the lawyer for this case. And they were looking for him, and they figured they'd go to the bar. I forgot the thing where all the lawyers are registered, and they couldn't find him. So they were trying to find his whereabouts. So it's kind of funny, but during the course of our trial, the judge says, "Hold it, I got some more information." He ordered the jury out and came in, and Colette's case was severed. And so she did, I think, about 2 months or 3 months in Alderson after the case. You know, our case was significant because of the things they tried to put in place. And if you see the parallel with what's happening now with the Uhuru case, I don't know whether I don't know whether either of y'all saw the tape Omowale did on I forgot the guy, this right-wing guy's show, but they showed the video of them coming into their house, and they set off a concussion grenade in the house, and the armament that came to them was like they were looking for, but once again, to color the nature of what's happening. You know, very similar. You can almost see that with, I mean, I don't want to get off into that, but if you look at the Diddy case, you know, look how they came to Diddy's house. You know what I'm saying? With armored cars and all of this. So you know, it's to create an atmosphere. You know,
make a show.
And then say the jury, don't forget all the stuff that you see. Forget all the show that we created. You have to be impartial and forget that.
Let's go back to the blind eye, you know, the blind woman of justice in terms like that. You know, the other thing too, I think is important for us to always remember, and is this point around fascism. You know, sometimes it really is important for us to kind of always look at our situation from our perspective, and to not too quickly define things because someone else has defined them for us. Now, it doesn't mean reinventing the wheel, but it certainly means, particularly in the political arena, how we begin to look at things. You know, we have a study group, and we're doing Franz Fanon, you know, and a lot of young folks coming in wanting to learn, to get an understanding of what's happening. You know, very revolutionary energy. You know, just need some theoretical and practical guidance and stuff. And one of the things we were talking about was that, you know, Western civilization would want you to think that fascism was this terrible, terrible thing, this genocidal thing that happened in Europe, and that Germany and Italy and Japan were like the fulcrum of that. But Robert Guest, you know, some of the writers, some of our scholars have been talking about this question, that they want us to believe that colonialism was like a normal part of development in the world. You know, it was like it was normal, and that, so it doesn't really get you into what was the nature of it. But if you look at the nature of what they accuse Hitler of and Mussolini of, the denial of human rights, the theft of resources, the oppression of labor and stuff, and you look at the colonies, The colonies were where they learned the development of fascism.
Yep.
And it was intricately tied to the question of capitalism and imperialism. But what is a colony? I mean, you know, when you really think about it, what is a colony but a political fascist existence? And, you know, known, of course, being one of the real scholars on this question, it makes us then say, when we were saying the New York 8 against, that was our defense committee, the New York 8 against fascist terrorism. The question, our existence, even in the United States, and, you know, Omowale and people in Uhuru, and, you know, people have their varying views around class and the national question, you know, but what we exist as in terms of being kidnapped and brought here, you know, he takes a view, we're a colony. You know, there's a big struggle around, we're a nation, a colony. What are we fighting for? National liberation? Are we fighting for autonomy and stuff like that? But we certainly have to start from what birthed us, you know? And this question around fascism is a very big question now. But for Black people, our existence has been parallel to development of fascism. I mean, that's the very nature of the existence in that regard. And so what happens to us is traditionally different than what happens other places because of its foundation on us. The colonization of Africa, Asia, Latin America, this colonial situation is literally fascism. You have no rights. All of your resources are stolen. Your labor is stolen and created super wealth for folks, but under the most, quote, unconstitutional, authoritarian, militaristic conditions in that sense. So I just wanted to say that for people, you know, sometimes it gets raised that, you know, America's moving toward fascism. But for Black people in this country, from the kidnapping and colonization of Africa to our existence here, that has been part and parcel of our very existence, you know, in that regard. And so,
absolutely.
You know, I just wanted to make sure to say that, because people just need to stay on top of what's happened to us, not to make us like something like unnatural, but certainly our concrete history of development in that regard and stuff. So we hope Thursday will be a number of people will come out, continue to teach. You know, Natasha knows what we do, you know. God, you know, she knows. The December 12th movement came out of the New York 8. You know, we like to always say they raised a giant rock and dropped it on their foot, because if no one knew of us before the New York 8, so many people more knew of us after the New York 8 case because of the significance of the case. And we tried to stay true to that in terms of our own struggle. You know, our international work, I think, has been very historic. I mean, simply trying to take what Malcolm said to us, that ours is a struggle for human rights, not civil rights. Unfortunately, the Human Rights Commission was in Geneva, Switzerland. So it wasn't on 42nd Street in Manhattan. Great if it had been there, because at the time we started going to the UN, it was probably one of the most expensive kind of numbers in the world. Geneva, Switzerland ain't no joke. Back then they were selling a personal pan pizza for like $10 when it was only like $2, $3 here and stuff. So, you know, being there for long periods of time, being there, being taught by the Cubans how to do international work. You know, we met some of the most incredible people in the world, you know, in the international arena. You know, it kind of nurtured us in terms of the battle around human rights, the battle around reparations, the victory of the World Conference Against Racism in 2000, when the transatlantic slave trade was declared a crime against humanity, and then led that next year to the first national reparations rally in the history of the United States in Washington, D.C. in 2001.
That's amazing work. Yeah, I think
a lot, you know, and the international work kind of led it, because it was other countries and stuff that said to us, you all want to talk about reparations in the United States, first you have to establish the crime. What was the crime? You know, reparations is repair for something that was done. He says, so don't let go of the crime, which is why we went to the World Conference. You know, there are crimes against humanity that have no statutes of limitations, and that's why they encouraged us. have the human rights, have the World Conference declare slavery and colonial as crimes against humanity. And at least you now have an international legal basis to always come back to. You know, so that was very important, and it led us also to our historical relationship with Zimbabwe and their fight there to not only liberate themselves but free the land. You know, when we talk, when when the RNA talked about down south, let's free the land.
Free the land, yeah.
That's the first question. I remember some Negroes were here talking about they don't need land, they need laptops. And I was saying, that's how distant. Now let me tell you, these people like, shoot.
People get real caught up in people get real caught up in what is material and what is what's important when we're thinking about materiality. And what is not important.
Eurocentric vision of everything. Like
yes, and they don't understand where culture comes from, where you come from. How did they fight national liberation struggles? First, you have to know who you are. Absolutely. If you don't know who you are, how are you going to fight somebody to free yourself if you don't know who yourself is? So Milcar Cabral and Samora Machel, and even before Machel, it was Eduardo Mondlane in Mozambique. These were like tremendous leaders and had to take on some incredible tasks. We think we got struggle fighting with the police in Brooklyn. Shoot, they had to fight with armies and stuff, and then take up arms. And then our stuff. Then we get to arguing with each other and talking to each other's mama and shit,
and taking our eye off the ball, off of the target, off of who the real enemy is. Yeah, absolutely.
They black too. They go through the same. They go through some of the same.
That's right.
That's how Natasha. I used to always say, President Mugabe was such a unique person because he used to say to us in December 12th, "You all remind me of us when we were at that stage." And he was like reflecting back, victory is always cool after the fact. But before you get there, all of the different things you got to go through to get there. And one of the things we just learned was, not only did they had to put two liberation movements, because they were ZANU and ZAPU. One more reflected the Shona and the other the Interbelly, So they had and they were waging liberation from different perspectives, Joshua and Como and Mugabe. And so they had to resolve that. They had to fight these crackers and then resolve that. And which led to, after liberation, they had a civil war. And then people say, no, they had a civil war. What is the military? It's politics at another level. And they had to fight and resolve that. And then they came with ZANU-PF, which is the front, and they joined together. And then the land question came up, and these are lessons for us. The land question came up. They gave crackers 10 years to resolve this. England said, and the United States said, what's my man's name from Atlanta? You know who I'm talking.
The current, what is it? Are we talking?
He was an ambassador. He was a black, I can't think of his name right now. He was from Atlanta. He was the ambassador at that time to the UN. The United States and Britain said they're going to pay white folks for the land in Zimbabwe. Okay, after the liberation, they reneged on that. The Zimbabweans didn't have the money to pay no crackers for the land they stole.
They always try to make us pay reparations for things that is already ours. You got to pay reparations for your freedom. You got to pay reparations for land that's already yours.
Yeah, England paid white folks for taking their land to free the slaves. They paid the white folks and stuff. I mean, but anyway, they waited and waited and waited. And, the brothers and sisters who fought in the liberation struggle, they said, we didn't go to war for a parliament. I know that looks cute. People put on that false hair and all of that. They act like white folks and like that, a little different than tribal councils and shit. But they said, we didn't go to war for a parliament. We went to war for our land. And of course, the Zimbabweans, having learned, their stuff was, well, we got to take the land back,
Yep.
They moved to take the land back.
Absolutely.
And our brother Ilumbe Brath, one of the founders of December 12th, he used to say, it's interesting about the press because they made the land grab in Zimbabwe like the worst thing on the planet Earth.
And they still do.
They killed that. But Ilumbe, going to the science of truth from facts, said there were more farmers. There were about 50 times more farmers that got killed in South Africa, and the South Africans didn't even get the land back. They killed in Zimbabwe. The difference was in South Africa, if a farmer got killed around some land issue, the land went to his children because the ownership of the land didn't change. This was some internal stuff. But in Zimbabwe, with them having state power, taking back the land was fundamental. So if a farmer got killed and stuff, they made that like that was the worst thing in the land, because the bottom line is Zimbabweans weren't giving back anything, you know, in that sense. So, you know, and now sanctions, they've been under sanctions like Cuba for over 20 years, you know, like that. You know, so
and we gotta continue to support the work that the December 12th movement does, because I know we're getting close to the time that you gotta go. And you know,
we're there.
You came on here.
Omowale running his mouth. We're there. I say we're like there.
You weren't on here for long, but you came in through strong. And I don't know if you wanted to say anything real quick. You know, in the last.
I guess I didn't give you a chance to say too much, Fernando. I mean,
I had a couple questions, but you know.
And shit, you know, I just turned, you know, my birthday was just Thursday. I turned 78.
Hey, happy birthday, happy belated.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk before I can't talk no more.
you got
you
3
seem to be
minutes
good
to ask your question, Fernando, before Omowale goes, but we'll definitely have him back on.
No, ask me.
Real quick. I just wanted to, you know, first of all, you know, again, thank you for being on the Rise Up with us, you know, and definitely wanted to salute you for all the work. You know, you said a lot of interesting things. You know, I think one of the things we definitely need to think about is how fascism has been around and mutating, you know, and has been ever since, you know, they stole our ancestors from the motherland and, you know, brought us to the Americas, you know. But I think another thing that's interesting is the way, you know, the RICO charges, you know, I believe that they started that for the mob, right? For the mafia, and the way they have been using that to attack, you know, our organizations and our people over the years. It's been heavy. I wanted to ask you about the Nobel law, right? Because you spoke about the Nobel law and how you had to prove your innocence. And I believe you mentioned something that how it was tied to South Africa. I don't know if it was also something with, you mentioned something about the Nobel law in South Africa. I wanted you to expand.
In South Africa, people remember during the time of the anti-apartheid movement, the South Africans had this whole thing about preventive detention. They just arrest you, you know, and this was something they applied to the Black South Africans. They could arrest you and just hold you like that. And, you know, people may not remember this, but years ago, you know, the South African military used to come in the American Police Department, the New York City Police Department, and they used to go back and forth in terms of shared experiences, because they were dealing with how do you deal with large numbers of Black people.
Yes.
And one of those expressions, and this is interesting, people may not know, was the West Indian Day Parade, which probably puts more Black people in the streets at one time than maybe the March on Washington, you know, who come out that march down Eastern Parkway. It used to go into the night and stuff. Then they came with a period when they said it's going to be over at 6 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock, I remember the first time it happened, at 6 o'clock, across Eastern Parkway, across all the lanes were flashing police cars, fire trucks. And behind them was a massive sanitation operation. And at 6 o'clock, whether the float was done or not, you had to get off of Eastern Parkway. And they put police officers on all of the different floats to make sure the drivers drove off. And I remember there was some information or discussion around, they were applying tactics of how the South Africans had trained about how you deal with Black mobs, you know, and the West Indian Day Parade prevented that kind of situation of a large Black mass, and how do you organize it and stuff. Some of the military things that they did there in terms of these flying squads, on each corner they would have police inside barricades on all 4 corners. And the purpose of if there's an incident, they're trained of how they come out of the barricades in like a Delta force. And they come in, which one is closest to that? And then a block away, they have reserves down blocks that people can't see at first, you know? So all of these tactics of dealing with masses of Black people, they coordinated. South Africa, the photo ID that kids used in colleges, when you get your ID fixed, the development of that by Kodak. Kodak did that in South Africa, giving Africans passes.
Wow.
That's law. That photography, give you an instant picture like that to put in a badge. They developed that for South Africa.
Wow.
And they used that. So that kind of training went on. So the preventive detention law, it was called the Bail Reform Act. It came known as, quote, the No Bail Act, but it was the Bail Reform Act, where in fact, if they could prove that you were a danger to the community or a risk of flight, they could apply that to you and you would not get bail. So that's why hearing turned so long, because they wanted to say that's who we were. So we had to defend ourselves to even be able to get bail. And so we had people come on to testify about our character. And you know what I mean? And but they lost that battle. In fact, Natasha, this is funny, Shimaranga, he went to Harvard when we were in court and they were still trying to keep him in jail regardless. They even went back and said that he owed, just when he was getting out, they said he owed library fees at the Harvard Library. And I remember Judge Carter said, please, come get that out of here. But they were so desperate to keep him in jail.
Right.
Because they wanted us to come into court in jail outfits. See, handcuff, like that.
So they can help to continue that atmosphere, that image, that show that they're trying to put out.
The fact that we could get up in court and walk out and come back and all of that, it had a calming effect on what was happening, in terms of that. But that was the thing with the no bail thing. The Bail Reform Act, and it's still on the books. It's still on the books.
And I think it reminds me a little bit of like you were saying, like not going into the Diddy stuff, but I think that's something that's been in the news in terms of the no bail and he's got to prove his character and he's got to prove all this stuff in order for him to be able to get bail, but he has not been able to do that. And coming out of, like you're saying, that reform.
Our advantage was none of us had been arrested. See, we came in there with no arrest. So this thing around, and then them saying that we had not actually, it was a conspiracy of conspiracies. So in court, trying to say that we were a risk of flight, I mean, but like that, families put up houses and stuff like that, so, it didn't fly, ultimately, Fernando, we think the bottom line was their own arrogance made them overreach. They thought they were omnipotent, They thought they were omnipotent, that whatever we want to do, we can do, and that's always a good lesson. You never stop fighting because you don't come from that they're going to win just because they know. No, you got to engage with them, you got to engage and stuff. So thank you all for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on.
I love this technology,
Thank you.
It's like me looking, I'm like from the Model T car, so some of this new stuff I look at, I'm not gonna make myself that bad, but now looking at this the technology of Rise Up. See, I hadn't heard of Rise Up before, so I think that's
and now you've heard of us, and you'll be back onto the show. We'll make sure we get you back on here.
And recommend other folks to come on.
Yeah. And we'll be in talk, Omowale, about.
Let me just tell you this. Monday, Black Solidarity Day is coming up.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother thing. So we could talk.
So we could definitely have you back on talk about Black Solidarity Day.
The Sunday before Black Solidarity at Bethany Baptist Church in on Malcolm X. On Marcus Garvey. Monday, Jordan Neely, the one who was strangled by that white guy on the train.
Yeah.
You remember him? See, a lot of people have forgotten about that. But do you know that white boy has collected over $2 million?
Yes, I remember, especially Sister Nzinga had told me.
$1 million.
That's crazy.
To give him legal counsel. So when I saw him coming into court, because they'd start the court on the Monday, the 21st, to start jury selection, we're organizing a rally that morning in a rally and a press conference that morning at the court, because the family, this brother's gone. His family is, a poor Black family in that sense. And this guy, I saw him coming in the court with this whole entourage of lawyers and stuff behind him.
With his he paying with his $2 million that those that they raised.
But it's $2 million that mainly white folks have given him to say it was all right strangling our brother to death.
Exactly, yeah.
That's crazy.
So that is something we definitely have to support, and we'll definitely have you back on for that, Omowale. I know you got to go, so thank you again. This is the Rise Up Morning Show.
You. I'm getting educated to all this high tech stuff. Fernando, nice meeting you, brother.
Thank you. Nice meeting you too. Hopefully we have you back on real soon.
Absolutely.
All right, Pete. So yeah, it was so much knowledge, right?
That was a lot. I think let's go to a little Black Power break.
We're gonna take a little Black Power break and
we'll get right back to it.
Anti-colonial movement, at the juncture, the issue became one of power. When they said power, it united with the struggles being led by people like Che Guevara, not only throughout Latin America, but in Africa and all the oppressed and fighting peoples of the world. That became a crucial issue. It became a crucial determination. It concretized in the real world what the struggle was about. And so that we came to understand that the issue is not to make your oppressor like you and struggling against his racism. The issue is not running around trying to educate the oppressor to stop doing something bad to you. The issue was to get the power over your life so that no matter what the oppressor thinks about you, he can't do nothing to hurt you. In fact, if you want to, you can do a job on him. That's what became clear to us. And so the movement achieved that amount of clarity. And of course, the fundamental thing was that it was a movement that took its ideological leadership from Malcolm X. And I mean explicitly Malcolm X. I want to be clear about that. I'm not talking about any other connection that Malcolm might have had any other time. I'm talking about Malcolm X was the ideological leader of this movement. And to further the point that I want to make, because some people like to attribute Malcolm X and what he said to Elijah Muhammad. I do not. And I do not do that because Elijah didn't do that. In fact, Elijah kicked Malcolm out of the organization precisely because he did not represent what Elijah did. And there was a tremendous split in the movement at that time with folk who believed in revolution. Because you ain't never heard nobody from the Nation of Islam before or since Malcolm X talk about the revolution. The revolution. And that was the thing that distinguished, that was the thing that drew the line in the organization. Somebody was talking about revolution, and Malcolm was that person, and he became the ideological father, if you will, of this movement that we are dealing with even today. In fact, Malcolm had been killed by the imperialists precisely because of where he was trying to take the movement even before it matured to the place that it matured. Malcolm was assassinated, but it was too late. And so by 1966, the movement was talking about power, black power over our own lives. By 1967, we saw the rise of the Black Panther Party, which took the struggle even further, and recognizing that, and which was an organization immediately and explicitly informed by Malcolm X, influenced by Malcolm X, who told us, Malcolm, who told us that every African, since it's legal to have a shotgun, every African should have a shotgun in his house. And he's also said that we should form rifle clubs. Didn't he say this? We should form rifle clubs all over this country. And Huey P. Newton heard Malcolm X and formed the Black Panther Party and was able to say that it was the influence of Malcolm X and, of course, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which also was influenced by Malcolm X, that gave rise to the Black Panther Party and what it stood for. And so we saw the rise of the Panther Party, and we saw tremendous anxiety occurring in this country. So much so that J. Edgar Hoover, who was then the executive director of the FBI, which is one of the secret political police
in this country characterized the Black Panther Party as the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States since the Civil War. Not Gaddafi, not Saddam Hussein, not the Russians, but ordinary African working class folk, most of whom lived in housing projects and had to use public transportation to get from one part of the city to the other. This was the force that Hoover declared was the greatest internal threat to the security of this country. And that's a statement about the potential for the power that we look for. And that's a statement about where the power should be looked for. It is in the masses of African workers and poor people who, given organization and ideological clarity, can achieve anything. That's the thing that Hoover and the FBI recognized. Unfortunately, not too many of our leaders today recognize that. And that's also the basis for most of the attacks that we see happening on the African workers and poor people in the housing projects and every place else, because that's where the revolution is at.
Yes, so that was our Black Power break, and so much he said connected to what Omowale was talking about too. Yeah, so I'm gonna let you go, Fernando.
Yeah, that was great. Omowale Clay touched on a lot of key points. The reason I asked him that towards the end was because I think it's always important for us to connect the struggles. You know what I mean? And so he spoke about that Nobel law that was basically the same thing that was going on in South Africa, that was used in South Africa as well. To oppress our people, to keep our people, to accuse our people. And for the oppression. And so he spoke about Zimbabwe as well and the struggle in Zimbabwe. But and when we speak about South Africa, there's also that connection today that we can do with with when apartheid and what's going on today in Palestine and all of that. So there's so many connections that are important to highlight, because sometimes we think that our situation is so different and it's so individual, when really, it's easy to connect the dot when we really know what's going on and understand that, how global the struggle is and should be, So yeah, that was key, I think.
Yeah, no, I think so much of what he said, like we could have a 2-hour show on so much of what he said, like so many different points that could have their own show. Where we need to be able to break them down, like you're saying, right? Because when we're able to know, right, what all the connections are, then we're able to move in a particular kind of way. It's like when he talked about being international and, in learning from what they were doing in Zimbabwe and Mugabe and, how they were, told, okay, well, you want to do the fight for reparations, but you got to make the claim. What's the claim? What are you claiming? And so that they're being taught that because they're connecting to and be in other countries and other other peoples that are struggling, right? That are struggling against fascism, struggling against colonialism and imperialism, and they see the tactics and they see the things that have been done in ways that they've been able to maneuver. And so, like you were saying with the South Africa piece, what I also thought was really interesting was how he said that South Africans and the South African police and also police here were going back and forth, exchanging ideas with each other, right? And even that whole thing about the ID cards, how they started that over there. And so in the same ways in that the colonialists and the imperialists are using each other's tactics and sharing ideas, we have to be doing the same thing, but in terms of being on the defense, right? And in terms of us resisting. So how are we going around and connecting to other places where we know that our people are and are fighting and are struggling against imperialism and colonialism and fascism? And what are they doing? What are the tactics that they've seen Europeans use against them? And what are the tactics that they've used in order to resist and to build and to, fight the oppression that they're facing? So I think, and like he said, the importance of us coming from our own understanding, not in definitions, not to be so quick to just take up definitions and ideas that are put out there for us. And part of that comes from, you know, what he said, learning from other people, and what the example that the South Africa example showed us too. So yeah.
And there's a current today, there's an example, you know, as far as, like you said, the South African police and exchanging with the police in the United States at that time. We could see that today with the Israel police from Israel and the police from the United States. We know they've you know, they work together. They've learned from each other in the way that they oppress people, you know. So like you said, it's important for us to do that, you know, to learn from each other, from the struggles, and to build, you know.
Yeah, and I think another connection I made between what Omowale was talking about and what Chairman Omowale was talking, Omowale Clay and Chairman Omowale were talking about was the ideological grounding of a movement, of our movement, and thinking about particularly how they both mentioned the Malcolm X, you know, continuing in the ideological positions of Malcolm X. And yes. So how those, and also the misunderstandings, like, you know, Omowale Yashiteli pointed out in the video that we just saw, how people take the things and ideas and theories that Malcolm was talking about and talking
Chairman O'Malley.
Yeah, O'Malley, not Omowale. Yeah, sorry about that, but yeah,
so good.
But yeah, how, you know, you have to make sure that you're putting it in the right context, right? Not saying like, oh, these ideas, you know, they were coming from Elijah Muhammad, but no, that these come from a lot of what, you know, Malcolm X was saying. And when we think about the Republic of New Africa, when we think about the December 12th movement, when we think about even Omowale Yashiteli, and I'm hoping I'm saying it right. Yeah, I'm not missing it, right? How you can see what happens, like he was saying, when you understand that the movement is not just, you're not just floating in the wind, but you're grounded in a real critical analysis and determination of your own situation and how to move forward from your own ideologies, from your own point of view, from your own worldview, and from your own analysis of your own situation, centering Black people in that situation. So I think, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and you know, that's what made Malcolm so great. You know, it was the fact that he was able to constantly, you know, adapt, keep learning and keep adapting his ideology, you know, keep expanding. And he wasn't afraid to be like, okay, I thought this back then, but now this is what it is, you know. And he just constantly, you know, just constantly bettered himself, you know, and kept struggling, kept sharpening his ideology and moving forward. And that's why when you see his latest, you know, thoughts and speeches, and it's the most powerful because he just kept getting better, you know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he kept on growing, and
that's internationally.
From, like, study, and like Omowale talked about, you know, he said they have a lot of young people who are coming to study groups, and they want the information, but they may have some of the information, but they're lacking a real study in a real theory, you know, a real way of breaking it down and thinking about the situation. And so, like you're saying, you know, Malcolm X, you could see his growth, because, you know, that was part of what he did for so long, and he always did. So yeah, I think there was so much richness in just our, you know, short interview with Omowale, but we'll definitely have him back on Black Power Media Reloaded, on the Rise Up Morning Show. I know we want to get into some stories.
Yeah, let's get to a couple stories. Yeah, let's do a couple stories. Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot going on, like always.
Exactly. And I think it's important, you know, to continue to connect those things that are going on to all of the things that we talk about, you know, the videos that we play, the people that we have on, because it's all connected, right? Yep. So one of the stories that I wanted to talk about today was the hurricane that struck North Carolina, and how prisoners were locked in the cells with their own feces for nearly a week. So when we think about the way in which people are told to evacuate, right? People are told to evacuate their houses, wherever they are, if they have a business, like evacuate in these areas. But yet, when it comes to the prisoners, right, they do not evacuate them, no matter what. And so it just goes to really show and highlight the inhumanity of the way prisoners are looked at and treated, especially when we know that within this carceral state that we, live within, a lot of the large majority of prisoners are Black, and that, we are disproportionately represented within the prison system. And there's so many of us who are imprisoned within the prison system for minor things that white people would not be in prison for. Absolutely. And also for things that we never committed. And even just from the story of the New York 8 that Omowale was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. How they're putting charges on them that they know that they didn't do, but just so that they can put them in jail. Yeah. As a way of what they call preventative measure. And so knowing how wrongfully incarcerated we always are, and knowing how much we're overrepresented in the within the prison system. Yeah. It helps to explain why the United States treats these and departments that are over these prisons treat the prisoners in such inhumane ways. That's right. And so I'm going to go a little bit more into the story. A key quote that was said was, and within the story was, "We thought we were going to die there. We didn't think anybody was going to come back for us." And so there's a particular person within the story that was asked to, be a particular prisoner in the story that was asked, person who's in prison in the story that was in North Carolina that was asked to be, called with their first name. So I'm going to refer to them in kind of like their story. But so Nick is the person whose story was relayed by a relative and was requested to, just use his first name. He was in the prison when the hurricane started to happen. And what happened was he realized that his cell was getting flooded. It began to flood. And so and then also at the same time, like his toilet wasn't flushing, and you imagine your toilet's not flushing and is getting ready to, the small cell that you're in is getting ready to flush. And so it said that for the next 5 days, more than 550 men incarcerated at Mountain View suffered in cells without lights or running water, according to, conversations with their family members. And that they said that 4 men serving sentences at the facility, as well as one currently incarcerated, were, some of the ones that shared their stories. And it said, as nearby residents sought refuge from the storm, the men were stuck in prison without, any way to get out, without freedom to leave, and in close quarters with their own excrement for nearly a week, from September 27th until October 2nd. And so more family members told that, the prisoners were forced to defecate in bags, and that their toilets filled up with feces over the time that they were in there. And it had to be, and they were, so imagine these prisoners are in flooded cells with piles of their feces in the toilets that are not flushing in plastic bags. There was also the power went out. So, and then in the story, it reads that when it became apparent that power and water outages would be long-term, that the NCDA, which is the NCDAC, which is like the head of which is the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, finally evacuated the facility in that evening. But that was after a week of them being in those conditions. And one of the things that the head of the NCDAC said was that he confirmed that the incarcerated people went to the bathroom in plastic bags. Some offenders, he said, quote, did defecate in plastic bags, he said that was a solution they devised them on their own. As if when you're stuck in a cell that is flooded and your toilet won't flush, you have the lighting is out. Well, you weren't providing any solutions to them. So what should they have done? Not put them in plastic bags? As if, to say, well, they decided that on their own when you wouldn't let them out, when you wouldn't evacuate the prison and you pretty much left them just in the cells. I mean, like how ridiculous is it to make that statement as if that makes any sense, right? But it continued to say that, food was scarce. And so they were getting like 4 crackers for breakfast, a cup of juice and milk, and 2 pieces of bread with peanut butter for dinner.
That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it says that on October 3rd, the NCDA announced it had evacuated a total of more than 2,000 incarcerated people from 5 facilities in flood-range Western North Carolina, relocating them further east. So after all of that, from September 27th, all that time, you had at least 2,000 in prison that were not evacuated, that were sitting in flooded cells, that were subject to inhumane treatment. And sure. So, so the family member just went on to talk about how the men at the Mountain View facility detailed a slow, confusing, and inequitable response to devastation wrought by Hurricane Helen. So, yeah.
Nah, this is what you said. It's just this. It shows how how they treat people as less than human. It's part of the whole system. That's how they do. That's how they maneuver. That's what it means to be, behind bars, in the system of oppression. Like you said, these are conditions that are not livable. Like you can't live under these conditions. No human should be living under these conditions. Not even animals should be living on under these conditions.
And guess what? And they wouldn't, right? I think there was a video I saw online somewhere of them evacuating all the animals.
That's where I was about to go. Like I'm sure in certain places like circuses and things like that, they would evacuate the animals, but they won't evacuate prisoners because they, in their minds, when you're a prisoner, you're a slave. That's how they operate. So you're worth, you're a thing, you're a commodity.
Right. And your life doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you die in prison, right? It doesn't matter if you die during a disaster, a natural disaster, like a hurricane. It doesn't matter if you have family. It doesn't matter if, you might have kids. Like none of that stuff matters.
Definitely.
And they would just throw the bodies. They were, after, people die, they would just throw the bodies probably into mass graves if they're not claimed by family members or whatever. So many times, especially when we think about prison, you have things happening to prisoners that families don't even find out about until later.
Yeah.
Right. So much mistreatment that, these correctional facilities hide from families. And that then the family has to go and do the work to figure out, okay, what did the prison do? Because then a lot of times they're covering it up.
Definitely. Nah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it even also makes me think about during COVID, right? When we had that whole COVID lockdown, and I think Charles Barron, he was on, talked a little bit about it. When we were mentioning, Jalil Muntaqim, he was in prison during COVID. Yeah. And the judge had granted him release because he was in danger of getting COVID, and he had and all his health ailments posed a huge health risk to him, and it posed, like if he got COVID, he could possibly die. And, Letitia James, who's now the Attorney General of New York State, went back and said, no, we need to stay in prison. and he ended up getting COVID. And we know that people were dying of COVID within the prisons. And, you know, give thanks that Jaleel, you know, didn't end up dying, but that was, you know, that was a tense moment at that time, because we all weren't sure, you know, we're constantly, you know, making sure we're paying attention, calling, keeping, you know, an open line and getting all the information to make sure that he's getting the treatment that he needs. I mean, that was also even another fight, you know, having COVID and getting the treatment that you need. And we know that prisons are not places for people to be dealing with these kinds of things.
No. And they're not giving treatment. We know the same thing is happening with Mumia. We know he's been needing certain things that they don't give him, you know, as far as treatment, etc. So yeah. So there was a couple more stories we wanted to get to. If that's all right, can I go on with the Martinique story?
Yeah, you can talk about your story next.
Yeah. There was a story about, you know, Martinique. You know, for those of you who don't know, Martinique is an island that is still to this day, you know, colonized by the French. You know, and so what's going on over there now is they're going through very rough times. For one thing that's interesting to point out is that, you know, last year in February of 2023, Martinique, they adopted a new flag, right? They adopted a new flag because they, you know, a lot of them, you know, understand that our people need independence, you know, so they adopted a new flag. And what's real interesting is that this flag, the colors of the flag are red, black, and green.
Oh,
those are the colors of the flag. Yeah. So there's a red triangle, and then there's like a green strap up top and a black one. So it's you know, it's the colors, and it was done purposefully. You know, like they spoke about it. So shout out to Martinique for that. But for those of you who don't know, Martinique is a place where to this day, the people who run the island are what they call over there les Béquets, right? Les Béquets are basically the whites, the descendants of the people who enslaved, you know, our ancestors over there on that island. They still run the island to this day, right? There are these rich white people that run the island, and they, you know, they live over there. They live in good, while most of the people over there, our brothers and sisters, are, you know, having it, you know, difficult. So recently, the prices went crazy. Right? Like we're talking about, you know, a lot of things are produced over there, for example, that are then imported to France. But now the prices are even cheaper in France. Like, say, for example, they import bananas and they sell them cheaper in France than they sell them for the people in Martinique. Right? And recently, it's just been too much. We're talking about like a 40% increase in food. So life has been crazy. And so people went out to the streets, and protests, right, started happening because people can no longer afford to shop for food. You know what I'm saying? So I have a story here. It reads, you know, Martinique authorities ban protests following deadly riots over rising prices, right? When we're talking about Martinique authorities, we're really talking about French authorities, right? These are, you know, it's a French colony, and they send the French police, and, you know, some locals, some of them, they send sometimes from here, from France. So anyway, authorities in the French Caribbean island of Martinique on Thursday said they planned to ban protests and impose a new curfew after fresh riots overnight over rising prices. At least one person was killed and 26 officers were wounded. Violent protests over high prices for food have rocked the island in recent weeks, with tensions reigniting Monday after a brief lull. So it says authorities in the French Caribbean island of Martinique on Thursday plan to. Okay, my bad. In recent weeks, the island of 350,000 people has been shaken by violent protests over high food prices. After ebbing for some days, tensions erupted again on Monday. During a fresh night of troubles from Wednesday to Thursday, protesters looted shops, erected burning barricades, and clashed with police. The local prefecture said one man died of his wounds after being shot, but that the police did not open fire during the night. Okay, so we know that. we know what's going on, right?
Right.
We understand what's going on. So basically, like I said, the prices are like people can't afford food, right? So peaceful protests started happening in Martinique. And obviously when peaceful protests start growing, when the number of people starts rising, we know what the police does. They go out there and they start, causing trouble. And so this is what's been happening. But the people have not backed down, right? The people have not backed down. The people have been out there. And so there's been, like we read, there's been a lot of people that have been wounded, and it's been tough. But I do want to mention that. I want to mention that, it's a good thing that people have been going out, that people have been using their voices, because it's been going on for too long. They control, like I said, these BKs, they control everything on the island. They control the prices that they can afford, but that the people cannot afford, and so the people are hungry and they're coming out to protest. And so we'll see how this goes, because like I said, now the oppression is rising. They've jailed some people, they've locked some people up, and they're saying obviously what they always say, we're not gonna back down, So it's difficult times right now in Martinique, for our brothers and sisters. They like I said, they're sending troops from France, all the way to Martinique to keep the oppression going in the streets. But yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot of things moving, around the world, and this is another thing that's going on. Like we know what's going on in Haiti. We know what's going on all over the world. So this brings us to a certain energy.
When we also think about, things that are going on in the Sahel region, with things that are going on in the Sudan, all over, like you were saying, and even other countries that, we haven't talked about, where we know this type of oppression is happening.
Yeah.
And the people are fed up, because you're, like you were saying before, which is something that I didn't know in terms of the amount of things that are imported into Martinique. And when we think about France and its colonial, what it calls its colonial territories, right? So when people think about colonialism as a past tense, as I like to make sure that I'm always thinking about it and talking about that, it's not a past tense. You have France, who has a colonial territory, in Martinique, and like currently. And like Omowale brought up, when people think about, fascism, was just in Europe and all this other stuff, like, no, the same things that, look at what was happening in the colonies, the same things that, you're charging these European dictators within Europe of, they're doing these same things outside in what they are calling so-called colonies, right? They're practicing their brutality.
Yes.
And then, helping each other do the same thing in all these other places. And, they practice it at home, and then they bring it out there. There's a African proverb that says, if a crocodile will eat its own eggs, what will it do to the flesh of a frog? And so just thinking about, the same mistreatment and maltreatment that they do to their own people within their own countries, they go out into the world and do the same thing.
Yes.
To the next level, right? If not more, to other people, right? That are not their people. And so just the case of Martinique, when we're thinking about food, and you want to have these high prices for the food in Martinique, for knowing that these people need it. And I'm sure that it's also the reason why they're making so much of the food be imported into Martinique is so that France could have a trade, a trade imbalance where, they're, having all these countries that they can export their quote unquote goods to, as opposed to having these countries being able to produce for themselves.
No, and the food that they import also from Martinique to here. And you know what they do? They sell it cheaper here in France than they do in Martinique. Think about that. That's wild. And so there's been like a 40% increase in down there.
You would think it would be cheaper in the place where you're getting it from.
Yes, but that's the way they control everything. So it shows how, they've been doing this shit on purpose. This, 40% increase in food and everything, making the situation unbearable for the people down there,
And just so I got it straight, because I think I missed it before. I mixed it up. The food from Martinique is imported into France, but it's cheaper in France. But it's grown and made in Martinique, whereas instead of it coming from France into Martinique.
Yes.
But it's cheaper. That's crazy. That's crazy. That is.
And then they have these same stores, the same chains. Obviously, it's a colony, so it's like, so they have the same chains. Like they have this one supermarket that's actually, that a lot of us are boycotting over here because they're directly linked. They're directly linked also to the genocide in Palestine as well. So they have this chain of supermarkets, and they're also over there in Martinique. Food super expensive. People can't afford. Like it's wild.
And I'm wondering, I don't know if in Martinique, in terms of the labor, right? In terms of people, well, we know under capitalism, the labor of the people is exploited so that the benefits of their labor don't go to them, but go to, the capitalists. And so how is the labor, how's the labor force? Like, what is I'm sure it's that they're doing all this labor and producing all of this stuff that is then shipped to France for cheap prices, but they're probably barely getting paid to be able to even afford that 40% markup that they put onto the food that they already producing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, supposedly, I think most of the laws are supposed to be the same as here in France. So, excuse me, they're supposed to have the same, how do you call it? The minimum wage, same minimum wage, and all of that is supposed to be the same, right? But we can see it. Like people here in France, a lot of us are struggling already to, what I'm saying, at the end of the month and all of that. So over there right now, they're having the food is like 40% more expensive than it is here right now. So even us that are here, we're understanding like, yo, this is crazy. Even us here, we're like, yo, the food is too expensive over here right now. So over there must be,
Yeah, so they're making the adjustment for the people who live in France, right? They're making the adjustment. So, okay, in Martinique, you get paid you have a standard wage that you have to get paid, right? A standard minimum wage. And then in France, you have a standard minimum wage. Yeah. But knowing that the minimum wage is still not enough to buy the food, they're making the adjustment for those in France, but they're not making the adjustment for those in Martinique. And they're actually doing the opposite, adjusting it to make it even harder. And I think in the article I even saw where they were talking about, trying to keep the people calm and ordering calm to be the thing of the day, where we know that's always the thing, right?
Yeah, because our people are mobilized right now. I'm telling you, it's really like they're burning and looting.
Exactly. And so they're always
calling
for calm. Yeah, that's the no justice, no peace, right? You want people calm, but there's tons of injustice and oppression. So there is not going to be any calm. You're calling for that. There's not going to be any calm. One of the basic things that everybody needs is to be able to feed themselves in order to live. So there's not going to be calm.
No. people are never out there for no reason, just being, just being disruptive for no reason. People don't just want to be out there getting hit by the police just for fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not how it works. So
exactly,
we see that all the time, and them say, oh, people are being disruptive, this and that. When we know it always starts with peaceful. It always starts peaceful with the people, but then we meet the forces.
And because I think as a people, we're expected to just take all of this and do nothing, right?
Yeah.
To just be okay with and just endure the mistreatment, and just and just be quiet and not do anything, and just
ask for, oh yeah, we need a raise. Times are difficult. But it's just too much now. So people are just going out and protesting and as they should. Yeah.
Our patience has worn. I mean, how many more 100 years of this do we need? We don't need not one more day of this.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, you're tuned in to the Rise Up Morning Show on Black Power Media Reloaded. I am Natasha.
I am Fernando.
Fernando Cardenas. Yeah, thanks for rocking with us today. I think we had a powerful show. What do you think, Fernando?
Yeah, I think it was a good one. I think I appreciate you. I appreciate our guest. Our guest was great. Was amazing. Our guest was amazing. Definitely go back. If you're just tuning in now, go back and check it out. We had Omowale Clay on earlier, and it was powerful. Definitely go back, check it out. Also, check out yesterday's episode of the Rise Up, with Jaleel Muntakin and Daruba bin Wahad, 58th anniversary of the Black Panther Party. And make sure you come back and check us out tomorrow morning. We're on Tuesday through Friday.
And make sure you check out the event that's happening, the 40th celebration, which, Omowale Clay, chair of the December 12th movement, talked about. And the December 12th movement is having their celebration of the 40th anniversary of the victory of the New York 8 over the U.S. government's attack on Black liberation, on the Black liberation movement. And that case was in October 17th of 1984. So, we know that the same things that were happening 40 years ago, the same tactics that were being used 40 years ago to destabilize the resistance of African people, right? The movement toward liberation for African Black people continues today in the days of October, coming up on Thursday, 17th, 2024. So, and he had mentioned some of the people who were the part of the New York 8. And so on this flyer, you can see over to the left, the people who were part of the New York 8, Wally, Colette, Viola Plummer, Letitia, and Roger Wareham and other members of the December 12th movement. You can check this flyer out. You can go to their website, the December12thmovement.org, and check that out, and check out the program on October 17th at 6:30 p.m. in Bed-Stuy Restoration Plaza on the first floor. So make sure to check that out. We also talked about earlier that on the 20th, there's going to be a People's Senate event concert. So if you missed that at the beginning of the show, we're telling you again about it here toward the end of the show. So make sure you also check that out. And also, if you have events like this happening in your area, whether it's in France, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Philly, wherever it is, please make sure to reach out to us. Let us know. We'll try to get that on there in a timely manner, so people have enough time to know about your event, get there. If they got to fly there, if they got to walk there, if they got to drive there, they'll get there. And so, we definitely want to help continue to spread the word about all of the things that we're doing to resist. So we often talk about how imperialism still exists. We're under fascism and colonialism, but at the same time that those things still exist, we know resistance still exists. We know we're still resisting, we're still organizing, and we're still building our movement toward liberation. So make sure, you let us know, because we need to know all the ways that we're doing it. We need to be going back to what we're talking about before, finding out strategies, connecting with each other, and building on those strategies. Without a doubt.
Yeah. And so since we're talking about events real quick, if there's anybody, around France or Europe, make sure, we do have with our organization, the Pan-African League Umoja, we have an event this upcoming Saturday, the 19th in Paris. Is going to be about the conflict in the Congo and, from its origins to what's going on today in the Congo. We have that. And obviously for us, we have in December, early December, we don't have a set date yet, but it'll be the Pan-African universities that we're trying to do on a yearly basis. So we're doing that in Paris as well, early December with the Pan-African League Umoja. It's going to be some guests coming through and it's going to be impactful. So we definitely got that going on.
And if you're not in Paris, but you're going to Paris, when you get over there,
that's
check
right.
out the event,
Mm-hmm. It's more than the Eiffel Tower out here. So
exactly.
You check out the struggle.
Get to know the people. Exactly. Don't go over there and just look at a bunch of things.
No doubt. Let me before we go, shout out to our co-hosts. I want to plug, some of the things that we do, check out We Charge Colonialism, with Dr. Ikemba and Natasha as well, right?
Yep, we do our morning show. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus in terms of the morning show, but we're getting back on it, so check us out for real.
Yeah, We Charge Colonialism.
And check out our old episodes. We have really great examination and reading of political works and ideologies and theories, and so all that stuff we're talking about. Yeah, check us out.
No doubt. Yeah, also check out the Indigenous Nightmare Network. You know what I mean? With the comrade Isaac Jasper. He got his thing going on over there.
And check out Fernando.
Some great work. Definitely Vital Hoops right here on Black Power Media. And I got a dope episode coming tomorrow with a special guest. I'm not gonna say nothing. I got a special guest for tomorrow's Vital Hoops. But anyway, we appreciate y'all. Thank you for rocking with us. This is the Rise Up International Morning Show.
And we'll see you next time. Rise up.
Rise up.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one, or the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares, mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces when it's on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. What we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my inner me really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven, like heaven's only in the sky, like chariots are swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face the same. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Where we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my enemy is really a mirror for the galaxy.
Yo.